In this video, I'm going to share with you how to choose a sleeping bag for summer backpacking. Summer backpacking is, of course, the warmest time in North America to go backpacking and adventuring in the outdoors, and that lightens your load quite a bit and makes it easier to choose sleeping bags and protective coverings to keep you warm at night. What I'm going to do is go through several steps in this video to show you some of the different considerations and things you might want to think about when you're looking for a sleeping bag for summer backpacking. By the way, I've got this information all in my book, Adventure Expedition 1, links in the description below, so definitely check that out when you have a chance. The first thing you need to consider when you're looking at a sleeping bag for summer backpacking is simply, do you want a sleeping bag at all? Whether you get a traditional down-filled sleeping bag like this Western Mountaineering Megalite, or you go with something completely alternative like a synthetic quilt, there are lots of options on the market. Now, fundamentally, the difference between the synthetic quilt and the down sleeping bag is the fill power and insulation. As you can see here under this tag that shall not be removed, yeah, right, the insulation here is 100% polyester fiber batting. That is a very popular thing now with long distance hikers like on the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trails. Using a synthetic quilt is really nice, and I'll explain why in a moment. Compare that to, where's my little label here? The 90% minimum goose down insulation in my Western Mountaineering Megalite. Now, the difference between synthetic and down is a natural material. It is collected from geese who have shed this in their egg barn or their pen, wherever they are. Somebody doesn't go blow away geese and collect the down, because it would, of course, ruin the down. That's why it's so expensive. Like Western Mountaineering, they collect Northern European goose down in these pins, and oh my gosh, super expensive. Compare that to synthetic material, which is oil-based, whatever you feel about that, and that polyester is generated into fibers that create a fill. So if you want to choose between down and synthetic, you have a couple factors. Down does not insulate when it's wet. Once the sleeping bag gets wet, the down will clump up and you will freeze. It's not enjoyable. Compare that to synthetic material. The synthetic material, although it is still wet, it will actually retain some warmth and insulation because synthetic does not clump up. So definitely, if you're in wet conditions like the Pacific Northwest, really consider a synthetic sleeping bag. Now, the next consideration is warmth versus weight. Down is still the best weight versus warmth insulation material on Earth. There's just simply nothing better. Believe me, if mankind could figure out a way to not have to use down and use something synthetic, we would, because then you wouldn't have to worry about the issues of down. Synthetic, on the other hand, is much more bulky, and it takes a lot more synthetic insulation to generate the same warmth and loft as a sleeping bag made of down. Now, that is another consideration. If you have allergies where you go, your face puffs up. I've seen this with another YouTuber. Boy, she had terrible puffiness in her face. What she had is she actually developed a reaction to her down. And I have had some sniffles with my down before, but what I discovered is that my sleeping bag was simply dirty. You need to wash your sleeping bag every so often. Ideally, you go get it professionally washed. You don't, once this fabric, and just like synthetic too, once this develops moisture and grime in it, you need to wash it, otherwise that grime starts to develop in mildew and mold, which can mess up your sinuses and your health. So that is a consideration. The next thing is longevity. When you're thinking, oh, am I going to spend $20 or $50 on a sleeping quilt, or maybe $230 versus anywhere from $40 to $1,000 for a down bag, that cost is really dramatic in the difference of what is cheap and what is expensive. One of my viewers on YouTube said, hey, by the way, I thought $190 or something like that was expensive. then this viewer looked at my sleeping bag of, whoa, $700. Exactly. So your cost versus performance come into these factors. Whether you have synthetic or down, down is always more expensive. How light the bag is, what the fabric it is made out of, the manufacturer, and all the other little details like zipper pulls and baffling and everything else. This particular bag has baffles to prevent cold spots from happening. You can see it here. This nice little baffle is pretty handy. It prevents cold spots along the zipper. Less expensive bags, whether they are down or synthetic, will not have this baffle, so you will get a cold spot along here. Compare that to a synthetic quilt or just a quilt. There is no baffling, there is nothing there because the design doesn't really allow for that and there's no particular need. Now those features sound like, oh, why would I want that? Well, when you're rolling around and it's for some reason extra chilly at night unexpectedly, that cold air starts to penetrate the zipper here and it starts to get in and you start to have a poor night of sleep. So even though you may have saved some money, you're sleeping poorly, you're not having a good time, and then you're more fatigued on your next day's hike or camp or whatever you're doing. So even though you think, oh wow, right now I don't want to spend that extra $50 or $100, when you're out in the wilderness and you're freezing and you're miserable, you will happily hand over your credit card and say, in the pain now, I don't care. So just because you're warm and comfortable at home and, oh, I don't want to spend that extra money on those few features, trust me, when you're in the middle of the Rocky Mountains and it's 2 a.m. and you're thrashing around and you're cold because a cold front moved through and you're freezing, you will hand over your credit card. So just remember, you are warm and comfortable when you're at a store. You will potentially not be warm and comfortable when you're in the outdoors. The next consideration about choosing a sleeping bag for summer backpacking is longevity. Traditionally, fiber-filled sleeping bags do not last as long as down. There are some arguments for this, but just to give you an idea, this down bag is over 20 years old. I mean, it still works great. I have no problems. I keep it stored very uncompressed and I have no problems. I keep it dry and all that. Traditionally, the fibers in synthetic bags over the years of crunching and munching tend to break down and they don't work as well. So that's something to consider as well. Check out links below. We'll hopefully link some arguments about whether one is better than the other. So that is a consideration of longevity and expense. Just to give you an idea of what you can do, one of my viewers on YouTube said, hey, by the way, I don't need a $700 or $800 sleeping bag on Kilimanjaro. I did just fine with my big box store sleeping bag for $40 or $45. Absolutely. Now, do you need to spend a crazy amount of money to go out backpacking and everything? No, you don't. The reason I bought this bag is for longevity and knowing that it has all the nice features that I want. Is it easy to justify $700? Nah, for a lot of people, maybe not. I don't know your financial situation. So when you're looking at a bag that's mind-bogglingly expensive, consider that the chances are that bag will last a lot longer. Now, the other last consideration you want to look at is what type of fabric the outer fabric of the sleeping bag is made out of. This Western Mountaineering is made of this ultra light fabric. It feels very silky and soft. And this fabric is just basic, keeps falling down there, is basic nylon, nothing too fancy and expensive. It's a little bit thicker. Neither of these bags are waterproof, but this particular synthetic bag is less expensive. The fabric is heavier. It probably will last as well as the ultralight fabric on my sleeping bag here. So that is something to watch out for. I just finally, after 20 plus years, put a tiny little hole in this and I did a little patch with Gear Aid, no problem. So that's something to consider too, is what type of fabric it is. Usually for summer, you want the lightest thing possible because you don't want to be hauling this on your back up a hill thinking, man, I brought an extra pound. So the fabric is a big consideration. And even though ordering online, I've got links to Amazon, it's really, really hard to figure out which one is the best without touching it and talking to people. So put a comment below and I'll try to answer your questions about those factors. Hopefully these different points that I've covered will be helpful to you in how to choose your sleeping bag for summer backpacking. My name is Aaron Linsdau. I'm a polar explorer and professional adventurer. Please check out links in the description to my books Antarctic Tears, Lost at Windy Corner, Adventure Expedition 1, How to Keep Your Feet Warm in the Cold, the Jackson Hole Hiking Guide, The Most Crucial Knots to Know, the 2024 Total Eclipse Guides, and my shows World Beyond and Antarctic Tears. Thank you very much for watching and enjoy your backpacking!